Welcome everyone to the 2020 APAC Groundbreakers virtual tour by APAC OUC. This year, our event will be the biggest one ever done with 174 sessions, including normal sessions, workshops, and hands-on labs from 123 different speakers over 11 days. Also, it will cover sessions on 4 different languages. Please remember to register to as many sessions you can, and all sessions will be available to replay as many times you want for 2 weeks after the initial session date and time. You can also interact with the speaker at any time during that 2 weeks by posting questions or comments directly in the playback session page. I would like to say thanks to our Oracle user groups and Java user groups that made this event possible and are member of APAC OUC, and also to our sponsors, Oracle Groundbreakers and CloudDB. Now for today's session, Oracle Analytics in Times of Change, Data Science in a Box by Edward Roske. Please feel free to write questions at any time during this session using the Q&A tab of the Zoom webinar. And in this case, Edward will answer them at the end of the session. If you have any issues during the presentation, please feel free to contact me as the moderator at any time by using the chat tab of Zoom webinar. In resume, if you have questions to Edward about the session, please use the Q&A tab on the Zoom webinar. And if you have any technical issues or anything else that you need to talk with me as the moderator, please use the chat for that. Now, without any more delays, I would like to leave you with this amazing session by Edward Roske. Edward, I'm stop sharing my screen and you have the control now.
Thank you very much, Francisco. It is great to be here. Next year, I hope to be traveling all around Asia Pacific in person, but for the moment, I am there in spirit, and you get to hear my voice and see my slides. My name is Edward Roske, and as CEO here at Interworld Consulting, I've been helping companies deal with uncertainty for over 25 years, but I will freely admit nothing has been like 2020. We're here today to talk about how Oracle Analytics can help customers survive and even thrive in this uncertain time. It's difficult to keep one step ahead of the data when everything's changing. Data is rapidly coming in from multiple sources every day, and it's coming in even faster. Customers have to manage the delivery and the consumption of it, as well as wade through it and analyze for next steps. The general concept is called analysis of uncertainty. What is analysis of uncertainty? Analysis of uncertainty is analyzing answers to the questions, what do we do now, even if we have incomplete information? Companies have been doing analytics for years, and the technology and the tool sets behind the scenes keep innovating and getting better. But now we're doing uncertainty analysis because the world has changed due to COVID-19. Companies are no longer forecasting scenarios, but they're putting together their action plans to respond, as well as to prevent any sort of repeat where they're caught off guard. Henry Ford once said that if he had asked the people at the start of the 20th century what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. If you ask people what they want now, their answers will have changed over the last 8 months. Everything from toilet paper to hand sanitizer, a new show they want to binge watch on Netflix. They want to wake up tomorrow, find out the whole coronavirus thing was a bad dream. But just like Henry Ford, we have to give people not what they want, we need to give them what they need. And what they need right now is help, and they need it fast. So every solution I'm going to cover today is something that either you or some company you're helping with can implement in 30 days or less. The two main tools I'm going to cover are both within the Oracle Analytics suite. Only two. I'm not going to give you 17 different things. And these two main tools, either Oracle Analytics Cloud or within an Oracle Data Visualization, are going to cover every functional use case that your customers and you need right now. Because we need quick tools. We need tools that make our lives easier. We don't need complicated solutions that take months and years to implement. And I'm going to cover generic industries because I don't want to limit anybody out. I do have industry-specific use cases. I might talk through them over the course of today, but if you don't see covered buy yours by the end of today and you want to know how does analytics specifically apply in my industry, whether it's, I don't know, retail, manufacturing, consumer packaged goods, high tech, higher education, construction, you name it. We just have a limited time today, so I'm going to show you some generic examples that you can extrapolate to your industry. If you have questions during the presentation, ask them in the Q&A bar down at the bottom. If you don't have time, I'll give you my email address at the very end. At Interrel, our job is to help customers do more with what they already have. So one of the things I like about Oracle Analytics Cloud is it doesn't mean we have to go off and buy a server and we have to set up a data center and we have to do tons of installation. It's something we can get using very, very quickly. We only do Oracle implementations. This is something that we've been very, very proud to focus on since 1997. That was the entirety of the commercial. 2020. Suffice to say, this is a year to remember, and I went way back in the Wayback Machine to figure out what we were all concerned with at the start of the year, and it was two things. It was murder hornets and Australian bushfires. We were extremely concerned, and all throughout the United States, we were watching intently to find out what was happening in Australia. Would the people be saved? Would the houses be saved? Very importantly, would the adorable koalas be saved? Then we went into a Russian-Saudi Arabian oil war where Russia was refusing to reduce output. Saudi Arabia was slashing oil prices. There was immense pressure on the oil industry. And we thought, this is really horrible. We have climate change destroying part of the planet while we're still using fossil fuels on the other side. And then a pandemic snuck up on us. We ran into racial injustice issues all around the world. There were hurricanes, there were natural storms everywhere on the planet. We thought in the United States, we don't want to be outdone by Australia, so we should have some fires of our own. So our entire Western United States basically caught on fire. And then just to top it off, Meghan and Harry have left the royal family. I'm still reeling for that one. I can't imagine how 2020 is going to get any worse. But we have to deal with our economy because it's affecting all of our livelihoods. So I'm not going to talk today about pandemic. I'm going to talk about how the world is changing and how we're going to react to it. And there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And there are a lot of companies that are trying to plan for it and then act on it. There are a lot of terms, a lot of scenarios being tossed around. Most of you don't have time to dive into it for months and figure out which of these make the most sense, which ones should you be analyzing, which ones should you be planning for. How do you plan for a world where everything is up in the air? I don't have time to cover them, but I'm absolutely positive it's going to be one of these things or a combination of some of these things. We started off the year thinking we only had a couple of types of recessions. We had a V-shaped recession, a U-shaped recession, an L-shaped recession, a W-shaped recession. They're starting to invent new terms. We're hearing things like a reverse tick mark, a square root recovery. My personal favorite, I heard a Nobel Prize winning economist recently refer to the recovery as a reverse Nike swoosh, which I thought was very topical of him. I wanted to figure out what companies were trying to analyze, what they were actually planning for, and how they were trying to figure out if they were in it. And I went out and surveyed 250 of the largest companies on the planet, and then I averaged them. And it turns out they all fell into one of three buckets. Bucket number one, that's the red curve. That's what we call the quick recovery. Bucket number two, that's the blue curve. That's the delayed recovery. The green curve is the prolonged recovery. Now, for simplicity, because it's really hard to look at global GDP, that number tends to lag 3 to 12 months. The fastest number I can get, because it's actually predicted and they get it out within a couple weeks after, is United States gross domestic product. The curves are identical. So if you look around the world, it's each one of these. It's either a slight V, it's a deeper V, or it's a bathtub. It's a U-shaped recession. The only thing it differs for individual countries is how deep it dips and how far out that dip actually goes. There, to the best of my knowledge, is no economy on the planet that says they are booming right now. Everybody is going down, and then everybody is doing some level of recovery. The key thing is to know which of these we're actually in. The quick recovery is what I call the let's hope it goes away by Easter 2020 recovery. This is the one that a lot of companies were hoping for in March and April, and at least one American president thought was pretty darn likely. In this quick recovery scenario, the developed world was going to hit their peak of coronavirus cases by May. There would not be a second wave. The world would get back to spending by the end of June. At this point, most of you are going, that's insane. Have you actually done any analysis lately of COVID counts? But realize most developed countries have hit some form of peak. Some of them went back down, some of them are going back up again and setting new peaks. Within the United States, our numbers are skyrocketing. A lot of other countries, particularly in Asia, particularly in Africa, they have their case counts under control. In this scenario, what happens is you see essentially one-ish quarter of decrease in revenue, gets back under control by the end of July. The economy recovers enough that Q3 is still higher revenue than Q2. By the end of September, we're back to where we were at the start of 2020. Now, in this scenario, it is about short-term risk mitigation. It's about companies, if you do the analysis and you think this is the situation we're in, and even if the whole economy isn't doing it, maybe your company is in this situation, what you have to do is conserve operating expenses, stabilize your supply chain, plan to come out of this with immediate resumption of where you were, maybe even stronger. Interestingly, Moody's Analytics has been calling this scenario as their most probable one. Most economists, most analysts are predicting one of the next two. This mostly has to do why Moody's thinks it's going to be this one. It has to do with the unemployment rate already increasing and decreasing, and there are some countries that actually are seeing as big an increase in Q3 as they saw decrease in Q2. Delayed recovery, this is the more realistic scenario. It's the one most companies are treating as their likely case. In the delayed recovery scenario, when you do the analysis of your revenue curves, what leads to this on a global scale, maybe not on your specific company, is where worldwide daily cases of COVID-19 keep growing into, let's call it a peak around September. In key countries like, I don't know, Brazil, India, the United States, this causes a decrease in consumer spending for 2 quarters. Essentially, we drop through September. I know what you're thinking, we're already in October. Problem is we don't have the numbers for September yet. We see a drop through September, and then we see recovery through the rest of this year and the first quarter of next year. If your analysis says your recovery looks like this, most companies at this point, when they do the analysis, will determine we need to take some aggressive strategies to drive revenue. We have to know what our least profitable products, our least profitable services, locations, and customers are, so that we can at least temporarily suspend the things that are costing us money. And instead focus on things we're actually getting our profit, the 20% of the things we do that result in 80% of our profitability. Be aware that in a delayed recovery, terminations are likely. It doesn't get us back to where we were for a full year. Now let's talk about the bad scenario. This is what's called a prolonged contraction, sometimes called a U-shaped recovery. In this one, the world doesn't hit our peak until late 2020, or it comes in waves. As quarantines are enacted, they're lifted, then they have to be reenacted again, like, oh, I don't know, the entire United States is doing at the moment. This is also a probable scenario if it turns out there is no clear treatment and there is no clear vaccine. If we are in this situation, COVID-19 infection becomes a way of life around the world, and it takes us a really long time to get out of this. What you're going to see in this case, just to prepare for it, it's a 2 quarters of bottoming out, 2 quarters of decrease, 2 quarters of bottoming out, much slower rise out of a recession than we went into it, lasting 4 quarters or more. In this situation, we don't get back to where we are now until sometime in 2022. If this is the scenario your company is in, you've got to get back to basics. Stop doing, likely permanently, the things that are costing you money. You have to focus on the most profitable products, most profitable services, the most profitable locations. You have to keep only the 20% of your customers that bring you 80% of your profitability. You have to purge yourself of those unprofitable customers, products, services, locations. I'm going to assume that you've already planned for these three scenarios, and at this point, it's merely a matter of figuring out which one you're in. If you haven't, please go do it immediately. These are the 3 most likely. So here's a mental poll for each one of you. You don't have to actually answer it in reality, just think it through. Which of these 3 scenarios do you think is most likely? Because we have the numbers in now for Q1 and Q2. They were only theoretical. but we do have those 2 quarters closed. Q3 is really close to being done because it wrapped up on September 30th. The numbers should be published fairly quickly. Again, I'm going to use US GDP just as the largest economy on earth, plus the US GDP numbers come out pretty darn quickly. So just say out loud to yourself, I think the most likely of these scenarios is, now that you've said it out loud, you can't take backsies. Here's what we actually saw in the first 2 quarters of the year. The black line is actual US GDP year to date. It's essentially the prolonged contraction model. Now, to be clear, this is US GDP. There are actually many, many countries around the world that have had just the bottom drop out of their economy. The United Kingdom had the biggest 1-quarter drop in GDP in over 300 years. The Bank of England predicts that their GDP isn't going to return to 2019 levels until 2023. So big question, do we all just give up and take our toys and go home? Okay, take a moment and realize we're done with Q3. All we're doing is waiting for the final numbers to come in. So predict for a moment where Q3 will end up. Now the Federal Reserve Bank is finalizing the number, but they actually do a really good, very accurate prediction of where the quarter is going to end up. It's genuinely accurate because it takes in data that comes in throughout the quarter. Things like housing starts, hiring, unemployment rates, factors it all in, usually gets it within a couple tenths of a percent. So here's what the Fed is predicting when the final numbers for July through September come in. Notice we're almost back up to the red number. This was a steeper decrease than even the prolonged contraction called for, but it's a steeper increase. We went down by roughly 29% in Q2. We went up by 31% in Q3. Now, if you're going, how do you go down by 29%? Go up by 31% and not be higher than you originally were. It's because of how math works. When you go down by 29%, you actually have to go up by 36, 37% to get back up to where you were. But right now, they are actually predicting that Q3 is most likely going to be a 32% increase. That's insane. If this happens, it will be the quickest recession in history. It will be the most V-shaped we have ever seen, as steep a drop as we've ever seen and as steep a rise we've ever seen. And in case you think they're just being overly optimistic, they were actually predicting only an 11.9% increase in GDP 6 weeks ago. So they started looking at all the numbers, looking at the hiring, looking at the spending. They think it's going to be a 32% increase. Now we got those scenarios modeled. We need to use analytics to come up with our action plan, because plans are useless if they don't drive us to a different physical action. So what do? How do we focus? That's where Oracle Analytics, our data scientist in a box, comes in handy. So all of you are going through this period of accelerated change. So at the start of March, we were all still traveling. People were thinking that maybe GDP growth might slow in 2020. No one was predicting a recession. Today, we're fighting for the survival of our companies. So every one of you is hoping it recovers as quickly as I just said, if not quicker. But to do that, there are a couple of tools that we absolutely must have to make it through the downturn. So I'm going to cover those at a high level. I'm going to show you specific use cases for how you can start focusing on the future, ensuring you stay afloat. So be aware this was already a really weird year. We will look back on 2020 and we will tell our grandchildren about it. It will be an inflection year, unlike anything since maybe 1945, 1939, 1929, 1918. It will be a year when the entire planet, as a global economic engine, that we all changed. There was already this massive change happening in the world of analytics. What was happening were two things converging at once. Those two things were big data and artificial intelligence. I'll talk about that in a second. Because while those are massive exponential changes that just happen to both be hitting their massive rise in 2020, there were a lot of other things that were already happening, that were already trending. The push towards more real-time analytics. We are not happy going, oh, we have twice as much data this year as 2 years ago. Our queries should take twice as long. Users believe, and I blame cell phones. Cell phones always get faster as newer versions come out. So people think all queries should just get faster every time they log in. So people push towards more and more real-time access to data. Mobile. It's not that people want to look at an income statement or do an operating statement or pull up a dashboard on their phone. We don't use our phones the same way we use our desktops. If you want to look at 10,000 rows by 25 columns in Excel, you're going to do that on your computer. You're going to do it on a laptop or a desktop. On the other hand, if you want to find out the 5 things that will get you fired today or the 3 things that will get you promoted today, you want that alert to show up on your phone. You want to see just really quick hit numbers. So think of it as device anywhere. If I'm not at my computer, I want high-level summary. If I'm at my computer, I want detail. Push towards self-service. It used to be we were happy waiting for 15 days into the next month to find out how we did last month, or waiting for IT to go build us a report. Users now want to make that themselves. Data visualization has been a major push because people don't want to look at grids of data to try and figure out if revenue is going up and expenses are going down. They want that all to be in easy to discern trends where they can see root causes. Natural language, we not only want to be able to ask queries without having to write complicated SQL or formulas, we would like it if it responded back to us in a way that also wasn't complicated and difficult to understand. Those are all trends. The 2 ones that are the revolutions are AI and big data. Now, in terms of how we can consume this, there are really 3 different ways, and the name changes fairly regularly. The middle one, for instance, the moment, I think it's called Oracle Fusion Applications for Autonomous Data Warehouse, but think of it as 3 different ways. One way you have, it's entirely in the cloud. It's 100% Oracle's problem. If the server crashes, if there's not enough power, if it's the middle of the night, you load twice as much data, you don't want the server to slow down, you don't deal with it. It's Oracle's responsibility. On the right side of the equation, what if you want it to be a responsibility? You have a lot of money invested in data centers. You're in an industry that can't easily share its data with the outside world. You need to keep it closed off in your data center. You want Oracle Analytics Server, which is essentially the next iteration of OBIE. So if you're still running on-prem BI, you look towards OAS. The middle one is the pre-built analytics. That's why the name changes, but think of it as anytime you need Oracle Analytics for an application like financials or human capital or procurement or whatever you're looking at, if it comes out of a pre-built application and comes with pre-built analytics, that's the middle one. Now, I'm going to talk a lot about the advent of AI, and that's because we're entering the 3rd generation of analytics. If you look at the 1st generation, it was very IT driven. It was all about governance and compliance. We must have common definitions, common language, common way to refer to those things. That was really generation 1.0. Think of this as your database, data warehouse, data mart type generation. Go put all the data into one place, make sure we all have a common version of the numbers, and if you want to access it, you probably go through IT to do it. Well, eventually users got fed up with it because while things like databases and data warehouse return a lot of agility and value when they're first built, someone has to maintain them. And what you find is that IT departments now, 70 to 75% of their budget is spent on maintaining systems, which leaves 25 to 30% at most of their time available to actually build new things. So users get frustrated, and what do? They export it using the duct tape of modern business. They export it to Excel. They go off and they build their own systems. They might use a little bit of Oracle data visualization, or they might use something like a Tableau, or they might use Microsoft Excel. Whatever they're doing also delivers a ton of agility at the beginning until they end up having to maintain their own systems. I've seen companies where they have Excel workbooks that are more than 50 megabytes in size. They become such a part of their company's process, they end up getting named after the person who first made the spreadsheet. So there'll be something out there like Francisco's massive workbook, and everybody will call it the Francisco workbook. Well, it returns a lot of agility at the beginning, but then Francisco or someone like him has to end up maintaining it. So eventually what happens is we say, we can't have the humans doing this analysis anymore. We have to let the computers do it. And we start off by getting a ton of value because the computers can work 24/7. They never sleep. They don't ask for raises, which is kind of nice. They don't get coronavirus, so they can keep working and working and working. So if that first generation is IT driven and the second generation is business driven, The third generation is computer driven. Now, at the moment, what happens is you have some data scientists come in and they write some R or some Python or some SAS. They generate a lot of really good machine learning algorithms, but then they have to maintain them. And it causes, again, a peak where we just don't have enough of them. In the United States, where I'm from, there are currently 300,000 open positions for data scientists. There are 100,000 people qualified to fill them. So there's basically a waiting list and there's a buying frenzy. Companies like Google and Facebook and Twitter will buy entire companies just to get the data scientists in that company. But here's the wonderful part. Of the computers led by Oracle are now starting to program themselves. So using concepts like deep learning, and I'll explain what that is in a second, we no longer have to have the humans come in and teach the computers how to do artificial intelligence. They can come up with it on their own. So Oracle Analytics Cloud is anytime you're taking a number and doing something with it. So whether it's a dashboard or a fixed report or mobile, or you're talking to it or you're trying to tell a story, everything from the data catalog to the data prep to the data analysis is part of Oracle Analytics Cloud. Now, artificial intelligence, if you're not already doing it, you're not exactly too late, but you're really, really close. Using US dollars, the spending by the end of 2023 will be at a run rate of 97.9 billion USD per year. This year, it's only going to be 37.5 billion USD. So it's going to basically triple in a 3-year period. And that's because companies are going to try and play catch up, where they go, yeah, we use AI maybe to automate our website and have it make recommendations to our customers on what they should buy, but we don't do any of it in our finance department. We don't use AI to predict which of our employees are going to be quitting. We don't use artificial intelligence to figure out which of our vendors are scamming us when they deliver us products, or where we have the most shrinkage across all of our store locations. You're going to be playing catch up in those areas, and AI is going to come in and start to assist. Now, artificial intelligence is not a new thing. It actually dates back by most people's measures to around the mid-1940s. Most people date it back to Alan Turing. His famous Turing test says, computers will have achieved artificial intelligence when a human in one room can communicate with the next room and will be unable to tell if the person communicating back is a computer or a human. Computers have long since been able to pass the Turing test. Now there's a more interesting one that happens, which is can humans seem very human-like? So when they're replying back, can they make it obvious they are not a computer when responding back? Well, that concept of the Turing identified, which is when a computer will be able to mimic a human, that really led to the next 35, 40 years of artificial intelligence development, where computers were trying to imitate, mimic, parrot, do what humans did in the way humans did it. And they did it by being programmed. This is exactly how a human would do it. We think of that as kind of generalized AI, but really it was copying. It was us telling it, we operate like this, please computer respond the exact same way. Well, eventually we gave rise, and again, it's been around for a while, about 40 years, to a concept called machine learning, where computers generate the ability to get smarter, where we didn't have to tell them exactly what to do. We could tell them how to learn. So we could program them and say, well, in this situation, you probably should learn how to do this. In this situation, you should learn how to do this. And AI began to get much more specialized. Now, machine learning is still popular. It's still coming up. And right now, we're in that data science space where to get good machine learning, we have to have a high price, but deservedly so, data scientists come in and give it that code. That gets back to that R and Python that we were talking about before. Deep learning is the next level of machine learning, which is the next level of artificial intelligence. Deep learning says, you don't need to give me any more information than what the rules are. Simply teach me the constraints. Within those constraints, I will get far smarter and I will learn how to do it on my own than you ever possibly could. Self-driving cars are doing it through deep learning. Modern pattern recognition is happening through deep learning. AlphaGo Zero is playing Go and chess, having been taught nothing more than the intro-level rules of it. Oracle is at the forefront of this. In case you think, well, this really doesn't sound like something relevant to my business, go to blogs.oracle.com/big-data/difference AI machine learning deep learning, and you'll hear about how Oracle now has AI as a service. Machine learning is, you actually have machine learning as a service that you can call from other routines like Oracle Analytics, and then deep learning is becoming part of everything. Now, in the early days, and by early days of Oracle machine learning, I mean 4 years ago, you did have to go create and have a data scientist build those ML models. Now that machine learning is just integrated where you don't have to go create it for the most part. So if you're using a functionality called explain, where you say, I want you to explain your understanding of attrition or your understanding of profitability, it will actually do that in a machine learning routine that it creates itself. If you right click and say kickoff trending or kickoff forecasting, you're calling on machine learning. If you happen to have written a machine learning model or want to call on one of the existing ones, you can make that part of your data flow. So it actually passes your data through machine learning. You can take that machine learning model, you can put it in an autonomous data warehouse, you can expose it to your semantic layer. You can see it in data enrichment, you can see it in OAX, you can see it in natural language processing. For the most part right now, it's taking a data scientist, taking an analyst, and using them each to do the best parts of their jobs. But what's starting to happen is we're no longer needing to handwrite that machine learning. We're no longer needing to go back and do those data scientist type functions. It's becoming embedded in everything we're doing. So within Oracle Analytics, within data visualization, it's a matter of not only being able to respond to your natural language, it can now give you answers back in natural language. So instead of just showing you a chart, it can actually analyze the chart and explain it. When you drag your data over, it will actually make recommendations based on how you've used it and how other people have used it on what the right visualization actually is. It's actually converging. So now instead of telling you, here is individual bits of information, it's getting into more of a storytelling mode where it's actually walking you through an entire narrative. And it's doing that narrative in actual English with pictures and videos and things to help support it. And the software is doing it so you don't have to have that normal traditional curve where it flattens out because you're having to go maintain all of this. I'm going to preach data visualization just for a little bit. Data visualization is more than just take a spreadsheet and make it so high-level people in the company that can't read spreadsheets can understand it. Data visualization is about looking at information in a new way, something that lets you make better business decisions faster, something that helps you visually see where those patterns are, where those correlations are, how those different business processes actually connect. Data visualization goes to something primal where we become storytellers. Where if you go back and look at cave drawings from 30,000 years ago, it's about pictures. It's helping understand and explain the world. That's what data visualization is. So we have a lot of that visualization inside of Oracle Analytics Cloud. We also have the more kind of traditional BI type interface. So what we used to do over in OBIE, where we have more guided analytics, that's also available now in Oracle Analytics. So there are some people that want to go with the more BI centric. There's a good reason to do this. If you have a lot of people that don't really understand analysis, it's not really their core skill set, you can make a centralized data repository in Oracle Analytics Cloud Enterprise. You can make lots of analysis and dashboards and guide them down a path. If your users are more mature in looking at data and understanding data, it's more about data visualization because you really want to let them self-service, set up their own projects, set up their own analysis, and guide themselves down a path. Some people asked me recently, what about just, I want a canned report, just make me something pretty that looks pixel perfect. There used to be an OBIE product called BI Publisher. That is still there in Oracle Analytics Cloud. It's not called published reporting. This is really for the people that either want a printed report or they want the digital equivalent of a printed report. Let me select from a list of reports, change a couple drop downs, maybe show me a PDF. These are not your data explorers. These are the ones not diving into visualization. These are the ones who really just want something that always looks the exact same. So you do have that type of user community. You also have your people that are purely mobile, that simply say, I walk around with my phone always either in my hand or within 2 meters from me. I want to be able to pull that phone up and have it show me all, if I'm a salesperson, my sales information. If I'm a a manager, let me see the utilization of my people. If I'm a C-level executive, let me look at my stock price and my earnings per share. And let me talk to it, because it's really hard to type and pull up a query dashboard. Definitely gonna not write SQL. All that is available in a component of OAC called Oracle Day by Day. So there are really 5 key areas. If you're going to only focus on doing 5 things, or only one of these 5 for the next 30 days, it's going to boil down to one of 5 areas. You're going to want some people that just want to summarize petabytes of data, and they want to do it in real time. People don't go, a petabyte, that sounds like a lot. I'm willing to wait a while. They want to see it as close to instantaneous as possible. You've got other people that want to predict the future, and they want to use the past to create trend lines and forecast lines. You have other people that want to put the power of analytics in their end users' hands. They want to create dashboards in a minute. They want to use whatever dashboard data is available, and they want it at their fingertips. You have some people that just want to find new correlations between the data, different ways of connecting things that they hadn't seen before. And all of those want to be able to tell their data in a data story. They want to be able to explain how they got to today and how they're going to get out of it, what data they're going to get out, and how they're going to survive into tomorrow. As fast as the information is changing, we need to deprioritize focusing on accurate, extended, detailed information all the way down to the nth decimal. What we instead need to do is focus on speed. Give a response back immediately, even if it's not right to the 10th decimal. I'd rather have a number, I'll tell you this as a CEO, that is 98% accurate that you gave me now versus a number that's 100% accurate you gave me 15 days into the month of November. We have to be able to generate our analyses in minutes, not days. All the tools I'm talking about focus on speed. As I said before, getting the right information to the right people at the right time so they can make better business decisions faster. When we talk about analysis in real time, Oracle Analytics lets us take live data from a multitude of data sources: autonomous data warehouse, ADW, flat files, applications, sentiment analysis from Twitter, just about anything you can imagine, and then display that data beautifully through the lens of a front-end dashboard. So when I'm inside of Oracle Analytics, I might be looking at sales. Now, this particular dashboard I built using the Oracle BI tool set. This is this is, in my opinion, visually tantalizing. Dashboards often show high-level aggregated data for decision makers like the C-level suite, usually in the form of key performance indicators or KPIs. These are highly interactive. They show a historical view of the world. What happened last year? What happened yesterday? What happened this morning? This happens to be my example here, a retail company that resells high-tech products. And notice I've got tiles and tree maps and grids. Users can filter on the data to see only what they need to see. I can drill into a particular data set to see more data related to it. I can change my view to something that looks more visually appealing. Look at those sexy bubble charts. Kind of reminds me of taking Excel to the nth degree. Except the data is managed and it's centrally maintained, and there's one version of the truth. I can look at an eagle eye view of sales, or I can dive down and look at the order details. I can look at either aggregated people, or I can look at details of retail and manufacturing, SKU level detail, supply chain detail, sales level detail. If I really want to look at a 4-point font number grid, I have that access, because within that BI tool set, I can look at interactive, highly formatted reporting through published reporting tools, and I can combine charts and grids to tell a data story. Let's talk about the future for a bit. Rather than try and drive the car by looking in the rearview mirror, we need to look out our front of our car. We need to take historical data and use it to predict the future. With all this aggregated data, all it takes is the right sophisticated tool set with the intelligence built right in. So to do this, we're going to use another powerful Oracle Analytics tool, which is data visualization. We can move seamlessly between one tool to the other just by pressing the equivalent of the easy button. So say I want to take a closer look at product pricing, but I want to analyze this data on my own terms. I'm going to start with the data in the dashboard, and then I'm going to go into another self-service tool, data visualization, where I can call the shots. So right now I'm in BI, and I want to go directly into data visualization. And I want my data set ready for analysis. Now, it's actually doing a lot of machine learning behind the scenes to help understand how I want to look at this data. What would be the right way to display it? The key thing though is I'm in control. By the way, that's a lot of chart types. I can turn this grid into a chart. I can remove other noise so I can focus on what I want to pay attention to. I can change to only look at revenue. I can look at it by month so that I can see the trend. If I wanted to emphasize the trend, I could add a formal trend line. It's actually running a machine learning trend behind the scenes. And if I want to, I can take and tell it, it's not just about trending, it's about forecasting. And this is kind of my confidence interval. And let's tell it to create a forecast. Let's go 6 months out. It's looking at historical trends. It's looking at the current wacky COVID-19 data. It's going to be pretty uncertain for the next 6 months, but it's a pretty good idea of where things are going to go. I did all that in about 1 minute and 25 seconds to take all that data. Now, by the way, it's not just looking at what's on the screen. It's actually going into all the details of the data to try and find correlations. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Self-service in under 1 minute. So all that I think was pretty impressive. I was starting with data set from a dashboard, but what if I want to start from my own data set? I don't want people to control me. So we're going to continue to use that amazing capabilities of the data visualization tool. We're going to show how a user can go from, pardon the Hercules quote, from 0 to hero in under 1 minute, and then export the visualization to a PowerPoint slide and email it all out. So here's a scenario that your customers are facing right now. Whoever is analyzing this data, your boss just called and said she's heading to a meeting, needs you to put together a chart that shows sales for May by department because they want to increase marketing dollars for those product departments, and they want to put a hold on purchasing the slower selling departments. The dashboard she's looking at is indicating that we need to focus on products in New York. That's easy with Oracle Analytics. So I have a file that I receive every day that gives me daily sales by state, by department. So I choose that data set to work with. Doesn't have a ton of columns to it. Off I go. So I choose product and sales to start building my chart. So I need to show sales by department. So I drag product into that color area of the canvas. Now I'm going to add a state filter. So I can grab just New York. Now I'm going to add a date filter. I'm going to set it to choose May of 2020. Now I'm going to need to pretty it up a little. So I'm going to sort the departments. How about highest to lowest? That looks a little bit better. That's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and email it. So I'm going to email it as a PowerPoint. Notice my data only contain daily sales. The weeks, the quarters, the months, those were all derived by data visualization. So there's my PowerPoint all ready to email out. I can see how it looks. I don't even have to do any additional work. That entire analysis took, I don't know, what was that, 85 seconds to produce with Oracle Analytics, starting with literally nothing other than the raw file that I was sent. But what about if we need to find patterns that we don't know are in the data? Sometimes we have to push the tool a little bit farther. We want to go find those correlations that are out there. So this happens to me all the time. I don't know if it happens to you. Your boss says, I love that. Now I need a whole lot more, and I need it a whole lot faster, and I need it a whole lot more regularly. So now I have to find out what state had the highest sales overall. And I have to add in some COVID analysis to see what impact the virus had on our sales. We'll have that sales data set already. I just discovered I can download the latest COVID data from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States. So notice on a map, I can quickly see that my highest sales in the country, the area that's dark blue, is Connecticut. That is interesting and also really odd because Connecticut is really tiny and most people outside the United States have never heard about it. So let's dig into Connecticut. So I drag sales and product onto the canvas. I can see this data another way. I can add, like I did before, some colors. I can sort them from highest to lowest. Now I'm going to filter those sales down just to the state of Connecticut. Interesting. Health and garden are booming. So I'm going to create a second canvas where I could zoom in on health and garden to see if COVID had any impact on these. So first thing I do is I copy that COVID data onto a new canvas. I'm going to create a line chart that shows product sales over time. And I can add filters for product. I can set it to garden. I can add a filter for state. And it turns out there's a correlation. Health and garden are steadily doing well because the number of cases are rising for COVID. Turns out people want to go outside. Gardeners got a garden. People want to stay healthy and they want to do it outdoors, not indoors. And that's a story that we need to tell. Once customers have that analysis, they need to be able to tell whatever their own story is. So Oracle Analytics has a feature for that. I'd love to walk it through you in detail, but we don't have enough time. Suffice to say, there's a narrate feature of data visualization where we can actually create a storyboard. So we could actually add a forecast, we could have it annotate the charts, then tell us everything about them. But the key thing is to make sure you're not just delivering somebody the outcome, you're actually taking them along with you for the journey. So you understand what led to those results and how you're actually going to deliver and be able to explain all of those results. So in conclusion, to bring us all together, your people need data more than ever, and it no longer takes a data scientist. I think of Oracle Analytics now as data scientist in a box, a place to take all that data that you have. The amount of data in the world is doubling every 2 years. Take all that data and turn it into action. We can take, and sky's the limit with our analysis. We can create dashboards for all levels of the organization. We can take those dashboards and go to data visualization, use that historical data to forecast future trend lines. We can use Oracle data visualization to merge our data sets and analyze with speed and efficiency. We can continue using Oracle data visualization to find new correlations in our data instead of having to wade through zillions, technical term, zillions of data cells manually. And we can tell that entire data story using Oracle's data visualizations narrate mode. So I know this was a ton of information. I strongly encourage you to go out to oracle.com, go download Oracle Analytics Cloud. Even if you haven't played with it in the past, you actually have free access. You can set up a small free virtual instance of Oracle Analytics Cloud and you can use it. If you have any questions afterwards, please email those over to me. My email address is eroske@interrel.com. My name is Edward Roske. Everyone, stay positive and test negative.
Thank you so much, Edward. Amazing session as always. We have no questions at the moment to the Q&A, but the playback will be available in a couple hours, and the people watching the replay will be able to ask you questions and interact with you by the playback dedicated page to this session.
Thank you, Francisco, and thank you, everybody. Y'all have a great day wherever you are in the world.
Likewise. Thank you.